Hi, welcome to Nothing Venture, Nothing Game. I'm your host, GM Jared, and today I'm joined with Steve.
Yo.
And we're taking a look at the independently created tabletop role-playing game Index Card RPG, created by Runehammer, the publisher Runehammer. Wow, that was way harder to say than I thought it would be, because it's two words that are pretty simple. So, Steve, Runehammer created this game, Index Card RPG, as well as Viking Death Squad. And we've already looked at Viking Death Squad. So I think we're kind of going a little bit backwards because Index Card RPG was their first system that was created.
I was about to say that too.
Yeah, it was their first system that they created. And we kind of jumped over that. We went to the Vikings, the Death, and the Squad.
I mean, why wouldn't you go straight to Vikings?
You go straight to Vikings. You always go straight Viking when given the opportunity. But
you always go full Viking.
You always go full Viking. So Index Card RPG is a tabletop role-playing game that is system agnostic, meaning it runs off of a D20 system, right? So you roll D20, add your modifiers, you hit a target number. Very simple to understand. But the reason why I say it's system agnostic is because when you buy the master edition, so there's multiple editions currently floating out there, but the master edition is what we are looking at. So if you're looking for it, you can find it in the links to the shop by Modiphius, and you can pick up the hardbound or the PDF. It's also on Drive-Thru RPG. This is
just for clarification. We just purchased this, so we didn't get anything for free. This is just our own reviewing the system because we think it's a fun system.
Yeah, we're not sponsored by them. If they want to come on and hang with us and give us a tour, we'd love to have you out. So if you see this, come hang out with us. But yeah, we purchased this book because we purchased Viking Death Squad, and we also purchased this at the same time. And now we're finally getting to it months later. But that's besides the point. So it's basically system agnostic because you can play in the system gives you two worlds up front, which I'll get into. So they have their fantasy and their sci-fi. And then later on, if you keep reading through the book, you'll get into two more worlds. Three more worlds? Two more worlds. One of them is Megafauna world, which is it's like kind of like Ice Age world. Like it's your if you've ever seen the TV show Primal, it's similar to that. They're dinosaurs and megafauna, so giant bears, cave bears, saber-toothed tigers, stuff like that. Then there's Ghost World, which is like kind of like a weird West. It's a Western with magic and demons and such. And then there's also their super powered universe. So like I said, system agnostic. You can use this system if you want to play a superhero campaign, if you want to play a fantasy campaign, if you want to play a space campaign, or if you want to like, what I like to do is the old school system, because I grew up with Flash Gordon and Kroll. If you want to take your peanut butter and your chocolate and mix it, you could play in your sword and sorcery, throw a little sci-fi in there, because if you've ever seen the movie Kroll, they are fighting a space monster. It's not like an evil wizard. It comes from space. And they're Cyclops, and I love the movie Kroll. I'm a big fan of the Kroll movie. Liam Neeson's in it, by the way, if you've never seen it. But this isn't a review on Kroll. So, Steve, why don't you explain the core elements of the system? Because I could talk about the system as a ethereal entity, but let's get into the core. So why don't you go over the core system?
All right. So the core system boils down to the whole game is played out in turns. So the GM kind of lays the groundwork, or the storyteller, or whatever they're called in the system, will lay the groundwork of the adventure of the day or the campaign or whatever. And then in turn order, so actually even outside of combat, you go, okay, Jared, what are you doing? And Jared will say, well, I'm going to try to do this action. And then you educate that action. And then you go, okay, well, Jared's done, Fabio's next. And then Fabio says what he's going to do. And you keep kind of doing that. And as you're doing that, obviously your Not just saying, well, I want to walk down the street. It's like, I want to try to do this. I want to try get information out of the barkeep, right? And then maybe you RP that scenario. And then Fabio, instead of goes out, he wants to pick some pockets out of some of the shady people over there to try to get try to pick maybe not some coins, but get information by like stealing some maps or something from them. And then maybe Zach wants to like do some weird arcane stuff and try to like scry or do some weird magic. And then we go around the table and you kind of build on that as you kind of going until generally combat may start. And yet again, combat is very similar. It's each person has a turn and they have a certain set of actions that they're allowed to take. And you kind of just keep going around, and then the monsters will have a turn, and you kind of keep going back and forth until you have resolution. The system when you're trying to do anything in the game, it has a simple check of system where you can go through and go, is this something so easy that I don't have to make a roll? Okay, you just do it. Like, okay, you want to do something that is so simplistic, GM's like, you're fine, you just do it. The second thing is this something that is a pass or fail? Like, I'm climbing on the wall. So it's not like I make some progress. No, I'm climbing on the wall or I fall. That's a pass or fail. So that's just a regular check. Or is it an attempt? And an attempt is like, say I'm trying to pick a lock or I'm fighting a monster, right? So that's something that may take multiple attempts to accomplish. So I'm picking the lock and I only got partway through, and in a turn, however long the turn lasts in time, okay, well, I'm picking the lock. Well, Jared is trying to beat the monster so he doesn't hit me in the back of the head while I'm trying to pick this stupid lock. But it may take me a couple of turns. It's going to take him a couple of turns to beat that monster, or for the monster to beat him, whichever happens. And everything is built on, you explain what you're doing. The DM says, okay, make a roll with this stat. And each stat is going to have a plus or 0 if you're not that lucky. And you roll D20, you plus that number. And then depending on what you're trying to do, your effort or amount of progress you're having to do will be a certain type of dice. Now, depending on the type of effort, which we can get into a little later, that's a little extra system in there. So it's not like, well, this sword does more damage than that sword, or this magic is different than that magic. I mean, they may have different effects, but they all use the same dice. And like I said, we're gonna step into that in a little bit later, which kind of simplifies a lot of this system. Instead of saying, okay, well, I have a long sword, and well, I have a short sword, and I have a sling, and I have a bow. It's all boiled down to the same set of dice.
So it's very simple. The game actually breaks everything down, like Steve was saying, into effort, and there's hearts. It's very old school, not video games, 80s, 70s video game. Legend of Zelda, you have your hearts, right? So each heart equals 10 hit points. So if a monster has 1 heart, it has 10 life. If a monster has 2 hearts, it's 20 life. And it's very simple. There is no like weird, like, oh, it has a +6 con, so this is its hit points, and it has a +10, dex, and this is its hit points. It's all just very simple, right? And that's also I'll get into the monsters a little bit, but effort goes into defeating hearts. And like Steve was saying, while I'm trying to beat the heart out of this beast that I'm defending against a monster, Steve's actually trying to pick a lock. And I, if I'm the GM, will adjudicate a heart amount. So I will say, oh, this lock is a 10. So it has 10 hit points. So Steve will make an effort roll.
Heart, right?
Or 1 heart, right?
Yeah.
So Steve will make an effort roll his dice, gets past the check, right? He passes the check, and then he rolls his effort die. And then whatever number, let's say it's 5. Well, Steve's done 1 effort, 5 points to that effort. And then the turn goes around, and then he makes the check again, rolls that D20, passes, rolls another 5, boom, lock is picked. So
yeah.
That's how effort works. Effort is in anything you're trying to do, which is a really nice system, because I was never a fan of the pass-fail checks in a lot of other systems, such as Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder and other systems, where it's either like, okay, you roll to make a check against the locks. Okay, you failed. I'm gonna roll again. You know, like I'm gonna roll again on my next turn. Okay, I passed. Okay, we went through. So then, did you really need to roll? Like, what really happened at that point? But this actually, there's like a consequence, and you know, and there's a number to defeat at that point. And then
a
also
target number.
A target number, and I also like it because as a GM, I can be like, well, this is a master lock, so it has 2 hearts, and then the player's like, oh, I didn't know. Oh shit! Run, guys!
Yeah. So the interesting thing is you have 2 competing ideas. You have a target number, which is the number I need to roll my d20 plus my stat to even attempt to, like, okay, well, I need to hit the AC target, or I need to be able to hit the monster. Well, the hitting the monster is I have to roll equal or better than their target number, or I need to pick that lock. I need to roll equal to or higher than the target number. The interesting thing about this is, unlike other systems where, like, okay, well, that monster has 1 AC and then that lock has another DC and this thing has another, in a single scene, everything has the same target number and the players are aware of what the target number is. Now, maybe you want to make the encounter a little more difficult, and you can just say that, okay, well, in this scene, the target number is 15 for everything because you're in a swamp and our enemies are wearing armor and just things are just bad, right? Well, 15 on a D20, and the pluses aren't that high in the system. So you may be getting +2, +3, maybe, if you're really good at something. So, you know, anything that's basically 15 or higher is really hard. So they have a system in place to make, you know, is the target easy or hard? So you have a state number. So the number right now we're saying is 15, which is already pretty high.
That's fairly high.
And I want, as the player, I want to try to make it easy. So I have to try to explain or give a reason why I am making this easier. So it even gives you examples of, so it even says if the target number is 15 or higher, you'll be looking for ways to make things easy. Here's a couple of examples. If you're using tools or implements to assist you. So normally if I'm picking a lock and I'm just using my dagger or whatever, or I'm sticking my finger in the lock or whatever, that's like a normal difficulty, whatever the difficulty number is. But if I just I pull out my thieves tools, and that might be an item on my character sheet, I pull out my thieves tools. Okay, well, the GM says, okay, well, this is easy for you. Generally, easy or hard, it's a -3 or a +3. So hard things increase the number, and then easy decreases the number. Okay, so I tried another thing to make it easy is last turn, I tried the exact same thing and failed. Because now I know what I'm getting into. So I've already experienced it. Now I can say, well, I've already seen this before. Okay, now I want to see if I can make this easy check. And then the GM can say, okay, yeah, you've seen this before. And I give you that +3. But then the next turn, since you succeeded, you can't make it easy that way. So it's a constant give and take on trying to make things easier or not. So maybe another player is sacrificing their turn and they're helping you. You know, that's another way to make it easy. So it's a really easy system to where you could just set a number as the DM, and then depending on if the player is trying to do something complicated, you make it harder for them, or the environment itself maybe is complicated, or the players are doing stuff to make it easier on themselves. It's an easy way to adjust that DC on the fly without too much thought. There's no complicated rules system. It's just, is it easy? Is it hard? Is it normal?
Yeah, it's a very simple system from the GM's perspective to handle. Talking about your character, this system does not have classes or levels. I've argued this with Steve. Steve argues
it doesn't have levels.
It does not have levels.
Does not have levels.
The game does not have levels. Me and Steve have argued this. I still argue that there are no classes. Steve says there are classes. If you read through the book, you will see, depending on the world you're playing in. So if you're playing in the fantasy world, there are fantasy classes. So there's the warrior standard class. If you're playing in the sci-fi, there's the sci-fi classes such as the engineer.
They call them character types, not classes, just to clarify. So technically, he's right. Technically, the word class doesn't show up. Right. It is character types, but the character types are a archetype of what we would understand as classes.
Yeah. So
you don't have to follow it, but they are there to give you a nice starting point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And since there is no levels, the way the system works, again, this is a very free form system. So if it sounds very different than what you're normally listening to, where when we do a review, we break down, okay, this is the rules, this is how you build a character, this is how you do this. The reason why we seem like we're talking very loose about this is because the system is more for the players and the GM to have a conversation and talk. So talking about character stuff, right? When there are no levels. So now you're like, well, how do I advance? Well, there's a milestone system. And depending on what happens, you will gain certain things. So for a simple milestone advancement, like they defeat a bunch of enemies, milestones should happen, like an easy small milestone thing will happen between 1 and 2 sessions. So like every 2 sessions, they should get a milestone. A milestone can be a stat increase, 1 stat increase, or like a ability, like a specific ability. And maybe they're playing in the fantasy genre and they're a warrior, but they've also kind of built this like high charisma based character. Maybe they're like a general, right? They're an ex-general. So now they're stealing stuff from the bard character type, and you're mixing and matching. And again, that's perfectly fine in this system. It's very like plug and play. It's you're kit bashing your system at this point, which I think is really interesting. It allows for characters to not feel themselves limited in the notion of their class or archetype. Obviously, it's kind of set up for like kind of 1 year of worth of play to have like the story arc kind of come to a close. So you're not going from like levels 1 to 20, since there are no levels. You're kind of going till the story kind of feels like it should come to its head. And I like that. I like that concept, because sometimes you'll play a campaign and you're like, oh, we've only hit level 10, guys. And we feel like everything's been hit. Like I got into Steve's character background, and I've got into Tina's character background, and Jeff's character background, and we've have resolution all over there. And we finally defeated, demonic Trox, the Overlord, and we've only hit level 10, but we've had so much fun, but we've only hit level 10. Well, I feel like we still need to keep going, because there's more
levels.
There's more levels. But in this, we've defeated the Overlord. We've freed the countryside. Steve's character has regained his honor from being a disgraced general. Zach's found his true love. Tina's built up her vast library of magical tomes, and we've kind of come to a head. Then the game kind of tells you like, hey, since there are no levels, you should just kind of like wean those characters out and go, okay, let's roll new characters. Let's play in the future of this world that we just created. Now we're playing the sci-fi setting.
You can end the game whenever you feel the game is necessary to end. And then start a new game, or maybe like fast forward time with the same characters. You can kind of do whatever you want. Or maybe you played in the fantasy world, now you want to play in space, and then you're walking around on a ship with like laser rifles, or you're playing in the Weird West and like zombies are trying to eat your face while you're shooting them with a six shooter. You just gotta go ham with it.
And that's something that the system I really like. I mean, we could sit here and obviously we're going to do a character build, like how to make a character in Index Card RPG or Icrpg. But there isn't a lot to talk on that segment, because it's you have your 6 base stats, your effort, and then your loot. And here's the cool thing about the system. How in games, your GM's like, hey, I need you to track, like, sometimes as a GM, I want my players to track how many candles they keep using, because at this point, they've definitely used over 400 candles or torches, or they've been using the same lantern since level 1, but have yet to buy oil. In Index Card RPG, but in Index Card RPG, you actually only have 10 item slots to wear any item. So you have to be very smart about what you're equipping, and you only have 10 carry slots. And
spells count towards this number.
Yes. So the wizard will not be running around, and I mean, they could run around in full plate armor, but they're also not running around with, 52 candles and, oil and 17 different staves and 14 power rings and 32 magic crystals. It's very like, let's keep track of what we have. And I like it because it also lends to having a base of operations. Like a secret clubhouse that like your players might find as they advance, and that could be an award the GM can give the players. Is, oh, you guys have gained a keep, so it also helps the GM kind of come up with more story elements, which is very interesting.
Interesting. Something I just learned. I thought all spells took up inventory space. Only intelligence spells take up inventory space.
Yeah, holy magic doesn't.
Yeah, wisdom spells do not take up inventory space. That's interesting. But so this isn't. So just to clear the air with the equipment, this isn't your standard. I have a +1 sword. Or I have boots that just do. My cloak gives me +1 to my saves. Items give you abilities.
Yeah.
And some of these abilities are useful. Like here you go. Healers case uses kit for bandages. Heal 1 hit point on an ally with an int or whiz roll. Includes bottles, scalpel, anti-venom. So it gives you a whole new action that you can take and try to heal another character. You get a climbing key. You get even some of the starting gear that you can start with. If I'm a bard, I can start with a reverse cloak and a modular costume cloak, and your fibs last 2d4 rounds. So you're really good at lying because the cloak lets you do things. Or you can get a fine instrument. Your battle hymns let an ally add a d8 to their next one roll. So items are significant.
Yeah.
And it's not just like, oh, I get this minor bonus to this one thing I do. They are significant. That's hence why you can only have 10 on your person at any given time, because any more, and I think it would break the game.
Yeah, you would suddenly become this like,
yeah, you'd have an answer for everything.
Almighty powerful entity.
Yeah.
And there is charts. They give you multiple charts, and since you have all these different charts, you just kind of roll on it, and then that's how you get loot. It's just a D100 chart.
Yeah.
Some of them are really cool. Like some of them are like Steve was saying, like I can find a smoke canister, creates a cloud of smoke with near radius for 1d4 rounds. That's a single item, but it's really dope. I pop a tab, drop a smoke, and I've now cleared smoke, and we can run. So maybe because Steve decided to try to pick the lock that is 2 hearts, and we should not have been doing that. My character can now pop smoke, and we can get out of there. And then that opens up a tab. It also gives credence to, I've heard this from a lot of my players. Is this the right time to use this? If you only have 10 slots, it's always the right time to use it, because you're going to find more stuff, and you want space for more stuff. So that's one of the aspects of Icrpg. Another thing that the game does go into, and one thing I love from Runehammer, is a massive GM section.
Yes.
And the GM section talks about how to create scenarios. And the reason why this is called, and I think this is the right time to talk about it, is Index Card RPG was, if you happen to be on YouTube, just look up Runehammer and you will find the creator.
We'll put a link down in the description as well.
Yeah. Click it, go to their channel, check it out, and you're going to see, and the creator talks about his perspective on how to run dungeons and how to run encounters. And it's kind of like, the reason why it's called index card is because you can play this with index cards, and you're supposed to kind of use index cards to enhance the scenarios. So we're in a swamp, right? And I pull 3 index cards. So in the swamp, is
index card 1 is called swamp, right? It may have a quick drawing of a swamp. You can actually get index cards that has the images on them, or you could just quickly doodle a swamp. It doesn't have to be.
We'll just write swamp.
We're not looking for a 24 by 36 map that's huge with minis. It literally is just an index card. It says swamp, and it's on the table. So now we're in the swamp.
And then I draw 3 more index cards, and one of them might say old mining area, village, and ancient temple. And that's in the swamp area. So then when my players turn, right, we talked about turns, they might all want to go to the ancient temple. So everyone's turn, they say, okay, collectively on our turns, we're going to go to the ancient temple. So I can jump forward. And then at the ancient temple, I can then draw 2 more cards. And then one of them's like, oh no, like guards. And then, locked door. And then that's when Steve runs to the locked door to unlock it. And I run to defend against the guards to get into the ancient temple.
In the ancient temple is those 2 things. And then, so now we're all in that location. So kind of harkening back to your point, now we were talking about like, oh, it's 2 hearts to, now we're going to talk about effort again, because we had said we are going to mention it a little later. So anytime you make a check that requires you to make an effort roll, so it's not a pass or fail, I'm trying to pick that lock, he's trying to fight the monsters. You make your check and the DM will say, okay, well, since you're picking a lock, I want you to roll a dexterity check. Okay, I roll a dexterity check and the target is like 11, right? It's a really old lock. It's kind of breaking down. So it's not that hard. So I rolled 11. So I succeed. Okay, so if I'm doing something that's with your bare hands or your wits, your effort die or how much progress you make is a D4 after successfully attempting to do whatever you're doing. But if I said, oh man, I pull out my thieves tool, so now I'm using a tool, or in this case, he might be using a weapon, that's a D6. So all weapons do a D6. All basic actions do D4. If you are including guns in your game, whether you're playing the sci-fi version or you decided to have like flintlock pistols or whatever, guns are D8s. Magics are D10s, magic and energy. So if you use like an energy weapon from like sci-fi version, and then there's an ultimate die with the D12. When you successfully roll a critical success, rolling a natural 20 on your D20, you roll a type of effort that fits above all the others. Is adding a D12 on top of that roll, and you have excelled at your attempt with ultimate results. So basically, it's a D12 on top of your normal effort.
Yeah. And that's all covered in the beginning. And then how to run using the index cards is covered within the Game Master area. And again, it's a very robust Game Master area. They talk about giving monsters objectives.
Yeah. And the game kind of boils this down into similar to like whether it's a simple task, a check, or an attempt. It breaks it down into a simple 3-set system as well when you're talking about in the GM guide, a location, a goal, and an obstacle. So that kind of boils down to like location is where we are, the goal is what we're trying to do, and the obstacle is what's in our way preventing us from doing that one thing.
Yeah.
And that the whole game can be boiled down to that. And that literally is just adding an obstacle in the way of the players. Could be as easy as you're on one side of the river and you need to get to the other side of the river and there's no bridge. Or there are monsters there, or there's a locked door, or there's a trap, or take your pick of anything you can come up with. It's just easy just to be able to. And then once you start realizing, you start chaining these together, you realize you have an entire adventure in front of you.
Oh, yeah. It's one of the great, I think it's a pick up and play. Like very simple pick up and play. But the problem is it's not it looks like a simple system, but it is still like robust where you will have fun as a player and you will have a great time as a GM. So now comes the negative part, the part where we talk about what we dislike about the system. Because I could talk all night, all day. I could ramble on about how much I love the system, the magic in the system, how it works, all the little intricacies. The thing I disliked is I feel like a madman put together this in the sense of it's not as coherent as I like the way the layout of the book is set up. Because it starts with character, like understanding your character, then it jumps into the fantasy sci-fi building characters to play, and then it jumps into the GM section, then it jumps back into understanding the different worlds, and that's where you get the Ghost Mountain world, which is your Weird West, and your Vigilant City, I believe it's called,
that's the
superhero
Vigilante
world.
City, which is the superhero one.
Yeah,
and then Blood and Snow, which is that Ice Age one.
Yeah, Blood and Snow is the Ice Age one, and then from there it jumps into magic. Yeah, and then it jumps into magic, and then it jumps into your tables, which is at that. But that's fine. Having like the tables at the end of the book is perfectly fine. The problem with the magic is it does two systems of magic. It does the base system of magic, and then if you go to the magic section, there's a secondary system of magic, like an advanced magic system, which is a bit confusing because there's two different, like there's the basic and then advanced. Like it's kind of like it was a little weird when we were looking through the book. And that was like that's my big nitpick. Like, I don't know how I would set it up. Maybe this was the best layout. And this was like the most cohesive it could look. But for me, it was a little disjointed when I was reading it. And I was just like, okay, so we got sci-fi and fantasy. Okay, cool. Okay, this is how I build my character in the sci-fi fantasy world, right? Makes sense. Cool. Now we're gonna get into the game mastering, the nuts and bolts. And that's where I want to read, because I really want to read about game mastering. And then okay, we got all the little monsters, which are really cool, and they break down into hearts and how to like make monsters, and then it jumps into the world section. But then you learn about the fantasy world, right? Alfheim, and then you learn about the
sci-fi,
the warp shell, which is the sci-fi, and then they have Ghost Mountain. You're like, huh? And that's the weird west, and then you have Vigilante City. Sorry, I keep saying Vigilante City. You're like superheroes, which has like a different system in itself.
Yeah, I think the major issue is like from a player's perspective, if you're handing this book or they're looking at the PDF, they go, okay, well, player's guide, that's what I need to know, right? And I look at the player's guide and I pick options, and they have the Anvil and Alfheim types in there, and they have the Alfheim basic loot and the spells, and then they have the warp shell, and then the warp shell types, which is character akin to character classes, life forms, or the different kind of bioforms you can take, and then they have basic loot. And then from a player perspective, if I didn't pay attention and kind of focus in on it, I may not notice that there are other, and obviously the GM's going to say, hey, what kind of game does everyone want to play? Does everyone, so you might know that ahead of time, but having all the character options kind of collated in one spot and maybe break that up into subchapters, like the Alfheim and the Warp Shell and then the Ghost Mountain and the Vigilante and then the Blitz. So that makes it easier from the player's perspective. And obviously, I know that magic is. I mean, look, it's not to mean that DM's not going to use magic. I don't have a problem being the magic system being all the way at the back. I'm more of the fact that, like, if you weren't 100% paying attention, you might miss out on the fact that all the worlds have different options for bioforms and character types.
And then also, like, one of the things we noticed was I wanted to make a Gerblin. And one of the things the Gerblins use are pistols. They use rifles.
Yeah, and we were plus the guns, I think. Yeah.
And we like were looking through, like, where's the guns in like the character creation? And I was like, well, I guess it would be crossbows. Like, I would just reflavor crossbows. And then that's kind of like, that's where we both had an epiphany, where the guns are in the Ghost world. By the way, you just scroll down to Ghost world and you find there are rifles, pistols in there. But I was like, that doesn't really fit the fantasy world, because now I'm running around as a Gerblin with like a Gatling gun, and I'm like, I mean, that might be in your fantasy, right? But if we was playing like strict, like kind of like very almost a little high fantasy, more than Tolkien, right? Might not have like Gatling guns. So we were like, flintlock pistols would make sense, and that's where we had the epiphany of, it's plug and play, and the GM and your player is supposed to have the conversation about how this works, and just come to a solid conclusion that doesn't make you overpowered. And that's how it works. You just say, hey, I think the flintlock pistol, I can only shoot at targets near, right? So it does no base movement speed. It's just far, near, or close, and that's it. It's the size of a banana. One banana is the best way to look at it. If you are a banana away from a target, you are far. If you are half a banana away from a target, you are near. And if you are at the very end of the banana and on top of the target, you are close. And that's melee range. And
that's actually a cool thing. Actually, a good thing you bring that up. There is no like distance in this game, in the sense of like, I have 5 squares of movement. my character can move 20 feet. My spell only has a 100-foot range. The range in this game is literally close, which you don't need to move. You're already close to it. Whether that's shooting a bow in its face right at point blank, whether that's punching it with your fists, using a melee weapon, or casting a spell, it doesn't matter. You're close. You can affect it. If you're near to something, you can just move to it. Every turn, you have basically 2 actions. You're allowed to move and you're allowed to do an action. If you're near to something, you spend 1 move, you're near it now. You're close to it now. So you go from near to close, or you from close to near. So you can move away from it. And then you can do an action. If it's far, it's more than 1 movement. So you can choose to move 2 actions. If you only move on your turn, so you're sacrificing your ability to do something except moving, and you move twice, now you go from close to far or far to close.
Yeah.
And that's how movement works. There's no, okay, well, dwarves only move 4 squares because they have a short, stumpy legs, and then the elves move an extra square because they're nimble and fast. No, that doesn't happen.
No.
It's literally just close, near, far.
Yeah. Ironically, there is an item like armor and stuff can affect that. But again, that's neither
cool.
here nor there. Like, if you look in the chart, the item chart. But yeah, like, so you talk to your GM and you figure out things where you say like, hey, can I do this? Can I do this? And that's kind of how we learned about like guns. We just kind of talked it out together, and like Steve was like, well, I would do it this way, and I was like, well, I would do it this way. But it's again like we tried to make it as fair as possible. So it turned out if I roll a 1, I have to spend a turn to clear a jam, and I can only shoot from near and close. Beyond that, I can't shoot. Like I'm outside of my pistol range.
Yeah, I would just like it the fact that they're mentioning the fact that it's an Alfheim life form, that Alfheim would mention firearms or guns in some way. That would be the only thing. Like the fact that, like I said, this is kind of how we found out that there were other worlds in the book, was that we went searching for guns and we were like, oh, it's in Ghost Mountain. What's Ghost Mountain? Oh my God, there's another world.
Yeah. I mean, like, yeah, we were just flipping through the book very quickly, and when we first got it, and we wanted to like, I was like, so the way I learn systems is I build characters, because that's I look and I figure out things that way, and then I make a bad character, and then I learn, and then I read the book, and I'm like, wow, that character was terrible, and then I redo it again. Some of the things, that was like one of the things that were very confusing, was just a bit of the layout, but neither here nor there. Steve, anything on your end that you dislike besides layout? I think
no,
that was my
really
biggest
the only
pet
thing.
peeve.
Is just like I said, a couple of things were just little, not where I would expect them to be. But everything is here. So that's the thing, is it's not that it's missing anything. It's just the order of things sometimes leaves things to where I would potentially miss things just because, like, oh, well, I would think it would be with this thing and it's actually in another chapter. But that's that's going to happen.
But with that said, I think this is a great purchase. It's currently up on modiphius. I would get this if you're tired of the generic systems out there. If you're tired of the standard, the big 2, right? Your Pathfinder and your D&D. If you're tired of playing those and you're looking for something a little bit fresh and that's similar, where you can convince your players to play, but also fresh enough where it's different enough and you have a lot of leeway, this is the system I would suggest.
It's very much open-ended. Yeah, I was going to say, it's very much open-ended to where it gives you enough rules and equipment and direction to get started, but also it's open-ended enough that you literally can do anything and you don't feel constrained by a system where it's like, oh, well, this rule says I can't, or this rule says I have to have that skill, or I have to cast this spell, or I have to do this or that, or I need help. No, it's just kind of just lets you kind of go a little crazy, but but there's enough there to rein you in.
Yeah. So check out the links below. Go check out Runehammer's YouTube page and get it straight from the beast mouth. But from all of us here at Nothing Venture, Nothing Game, I want to say thank you for spending a few moments with us to check out our review of Index Card RPG. Say goodbye, Steve.
Later.